Welcome to the Takeoff Podcast, the go-to construction podcast for construction professionals seeking inspiration, education, or motivation for the next steps in their career. Each Monday, you'll be joined by me, Mick Donaghy, Managing Director of Gedden Executive Recruitment and a respected name from the industry. A construction leader, a business owner, or someone in the thick of the action. The whole premise of this podcast is for you to get something from it. An idea, a connection, a mentor, whatever it is, I hope you get it. And I hope you enjoy the show. Without further ado, let's get into it. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of The Takeoff. Today we are joined by a very special guest. We have Jonathan Warburton on the show. Jonathan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I don't know whether I'm a special guest, but thank you, and it'll be good to have a chat today.
Good. Jonathan, do you mind sort of giving us a bit of an insight to who you are, what you do, and before we sort of get into the show?
I'll say Jonathan Warburton. I'm working in construction, been working in the commercial quantity surveying space for over 16 years now. Started off working in the UK, and suppose we'll get into where that's led me with my career so far, but started off in the UK, worked a bit in the Middle East, spent some time in Africa, and now working in Australia, in Sydney. At the moment, predominantly worked on civil engineering and infrastructure projects in my career so far.
We spoke off camera yesterday. You've got quite an interesting story. So you're a citizen of Australia then, is that right, Jonathan? How did that all come about?
No, so I'm really lucky. So my parents, when they were going back maybe 40 years now, so they were, 27, they were obviously living in Liverpool, lived in Liverpool the whole life, and they decided to come to Australia. So that was probably just after they call it the £10 POM era.
Yeah.
So they came for maybe 10 years. Within that period, they become citizens.
Yep.
Now, for some reason, they went back to the UK, had me and my sister, so I'm a twin. They came back to Australia, spent maybe a year and a half in Australia, and then moved back to the UK, which I suppose is the reason they came back, was the struggles of everyone probably faces as an expat. As you get to that certain point in your life, you want kids, and if you haven't got a large family base around you, it can be pretty difficult. And that's what I think they found. Two kids, young kids, young babies, and quickly moved back to the UK. And I think they definitely regret it. And I mean, now both their children, me and my sister, now live in Australia, which is a turn of events. But I suppose we had the golden ticket, really. We were able to get Australian citizenship through descent. And I didn't maybe use that on my passport until I was 31 or 30 maybe, and when I first moved to Australia.
That's quite an interesting story. Normally it's the same old of, I wanted to go, applied for working holiday visa, went through that process, So take me back. How did you get involved in construction, Jonathan? Talk to me a little bit more about that.
So I suppose ever since I was little, I've been around construction. So my dad was a bricklayer. I suppose when he was a little bit, he then had his own, and still has to this day, is a bricklaying subcontractor. So he's got his own company. And I quickly, from a young age, he take me to sites here and there. And from probably 14, 15 years of age, I was labouring for him. I was predominantly, he was always doing house building on large developments, but house building. And then that was it. I mean, summers, winters, school holidays. I was probably the smallest hod carrier in Liverpool at that time. But I was sort of realised that, okay, this is a career option for me. And I pursued it. But I probably quickly realised that I didn't want to get my hands dirty. And I started, researching the quantity surveying profession, and that's where it led me to. I mean, going on from that, I suppose I went to John Moores University in Liverpool, and I was lucky in respects that I had a part-time job working for a subcontractor as well, actually, in the flooring industry, that were doing all like large commercial projects in the healthcare industry, schools, hospitals, retail, stuff like that as well. So I got good experience from quite a young age, so I was lucky in that respect.
You managed to essentially, sort of what I'm getting from that is that you're born into a bit of a construction family. Like my old man, he's a plumber. He's done the same thing every day that I was off. After holidays, summer holidays, he's seen that there was an opportunity to have a bit of labour. Tag along, someone running out to the van, getting them fittings. So similar sort of thing for you, Jonathan. You sort of just worked your way from the family environment into the more professional side?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, as I say, and I was always around. So even from a young age, I remember again Jordans, printed out Jordans were always around the house. And to be fair, my dad always, show me them and explain what they were, and it was a great learning curve for me. I remember going to uni, and actually when I started working on site, I did have a bit of a leg up in terms of the knowledge that I had in
Mhm,
terms of construction knowledge, and that was from that, just seeing things being built,
mhm.
program, how long things take. To this day, I could tell you how long a 3-bed house, semi-detached,
Yeah.
would take to build, and I'd know the construction logic, So that was good, but that's not what I'm doing now. I think from a young age, I always had in my head that I'd probably work for, a housing developer. In some respects, that's what I wanted to do, but that just, opportunities come forward, and actually what opportunities were there at that time. I graduated in, I forget, 2010 maybe.
Mhm.
That's
Yep.
just after the global financial crisis. Now there was no jobs in the UK, or very minimal opportunities, at least with main contractors. You probably know in the UK, you sort of, when you finish university, there's two roads that you can go down. One, the PQS
Yep.
consultancy background, or main contractors, I suppose, or subcontractors. And I always wanted to go with the main contractor route. I was sending letters constantly trying to get an opportunity, and I got one, which company called Interserve. Have you
Mhm.
heard of them?
Yeah, massive company.
Yeah, they're still going now, and I know they've downsized a lot. But again, my first opportunity, and that's how construction was. It was never going to be in Liverpool or
Mhm,
in the Northwest.
mhm,
My first job, and it's actually probably the best thing that happened to me, is I was working away down in Birmingham. I think the first opportunity and the first location. So I was away Monday to Friday, but quickly, that allowed me to get really stuck into work. I had a good work ethic, and still have today, and actually just flung into a new environment
mhm.
sort of on your own. It does allow you to grow up a little bit quicker, and you learn a lot of things about yourself.
So what was that first job then that you got involved in? Say, when you sending out all those letters, you get that
Yeah,
first offer, you go out on
yeah.
site. What does that first project look like?
That one was a highways agency framework project. So that's what in Australia you'd have as your Transport for New South Wales. So these projects were literally underneath Spaghetti Junction.
Mhm.
So Spaghetti Junction, that is going under constant upgrade even to this day, to
Yep.
the point where there was bloody holes in the
Mhm.
carriageway
Yeah.
sometimes. But that was really interesting. They were small value, but high quantity small projects, and they
Mhm.
were a really good learning curve. Now, I know a lot of people seem to be really interested in these high value, massive infrastructure projects. These smaller projects, actually, you get a lot more from them in terms of experience, because you're
Mhm.
doing everything. I went
Mhm.
in as a pretty much, a graduate QS, and I was doing everything from
Mhm.
from from day one. Obviously, I had a senior, but it was a really good learning curve for me, and I probably worked on them types of projects for maybe the first year, and then I got, again, this is probably how construction was in them days, not so much now. You get a tap on the shoulder. We've won a new project, which was further down south in England, which was Kettering, so Northamptonshire.
Mhm.
It was what I thought was a massive scheme at that point. It was probably only 30-40 million pound new build road project, greenfield site, maybe about 10 kilometres, a few structures, all that type of stuff. So I was like, yeah, okay, when do we start? Oh, you go Monday. That was
Mhm.
Friday afternoon. And that's just the way it was. And which is a lot different to maybe how construction is now. Everyone's got a little bit more choice, because at the moment
Mm.
there's jobs around, and that's just how the environment was in them days. You get told where you were going and when.
Well, I remember that it was. I mean, that's when I started in recruitment, in construction recruitment. So
Yeah,
people were forced to go where the work was. It
yeah,
was like there wasn't any other opportunity. It was either that or go on benefit. Or go
yeah, of course, yeah,
laboring for one of
yeah,
your mates' crews or something like that. So there's definitely, as you said, a lot more choice now. There seems to be a lot more specialists, contractors, consultancies. Different businesses needing different sort of skill set and specialisms.
and as I say, that's what it was like for me. So again, I worked on this project, had some really good mentors on that project who were like project managers. I was lucky. The project manager, his wife was my boss on that project.
Oh yeah,
So who's, what it's like sometimes. Engineers or project managers either hate the QS,
yeah.
or they love them. This guy didn't have a choice, because his wife
Was
was
your
the
boss?
senior QS and was my boss. So to be fair, he really took me under his wing, and he learned me a lot, especially around understanding specs at
Yeah.
that point. And that has a real influence on how you price things, and how you measure, and ultimately how you administer contracts as well. And it was a really good project, again, as a learning curve for me.
What made you want to go down the quantity surveying route as opposed to, say, going down the project management side?
The idea of just dealing with the money. I always, again, probably doing the limited bit of research that I knew, I had it in somewhere in my head that quantity surveyors have got potential to earn good money. Okay, what I seen as good money at that moment in time, and I just seen it as a decent career option, to be honest. And to be fair, it's working out okay so far, and I do enjoy that. I enjoy the interface and the communication with everyone on a project, whether that be client, supply chain, your day-to-day communication with your project management staff and stuff like that as well.
Obviously, you move from more. Obviously, you mentioned you started off like with your dad doing the bricklaying, and
Yeah,
going to university, and then you sort of end up working out more in the sort of civil space. What was the sort of plan for you at that point? Were you sort of just heading down that space, sort of blinkers on, this is where I'm going, get in the building again?
My plan probably was, well, really, I always had a plan to be, I wanted diverse experience, to be honest. I think it quickly, just, again, meeting people over the years in QSs, people who'd worked overseas and telling me about working in, say, the Middle East and all that type of stuff, I was pretty dead set that that's what I wanted to do at some time, when the time was right. I mean, when I was thinking that, I was probably, I don't know, 23 maybe. So I still had a lot of experience to get under my belt. And don't get me wrong, I research all the time for these jobs, but they always say they want 10 years experience and all this sort of stuff. But I finished on that project, and then I got offered an opportunity a bit close to home. Again, highways agency type framework stuff. It was working for Balfour Beatty. I think I took that job at that moment in time selfishly, probably that was close to home, as in home being Liverpool at that point, because I probably had a little bit, I got a little bit sick of maybe working away and commuting all the time. So I took this job, and again, good experience. It was low value projects, but high turnover. We do 3 or 4 projects a week, and you might have a number of different subcontractors on these projects. And so it was quite intense work. But then what happened, again, probably only 6 months into that job, there was a massive project that was on our doorstep. I don't know whether you wouldn't have heard of it, but there's a new bridge got built over the River Mersey in Runcorn. It was called the Mersey Gateway Project. That was, like, in Australian terms, $1 billion project. That was 15 minutes away from home.
Oh yeah.
And it had everything, cable stay, but all your fancy infrastructure civil stuff. And I really wanted a bit of that. I applied for it, and I got that job. And I remember going in to see the commercial director who I was working with at the time, and I said, I know I've only been here 6 months, but I've got this opportunity, and I really, really want to go for it. And he actually just started the role maybe a couple of months previously, and he'd actually come from Australia working on the rail projects, and he said, where do you want to go with your career? And I said, listen, I want to go overseas. And he said, well, okay, well, there's 2 options. If you want to forge a career for yourself in this type of project, like, the options are open for you. Or if you want to go and work overseas, they want to see these $1 billion projects on your CV. That's just the way it is. And I said, to be honest, that's what I want. So he said, well, go for it. And I did, and it really was an amazing project, probably one of the best projects I've worked on. And it was 15 minutes away from home. I'll never get that lucky in my life, I don't think. That was a real dip my toe and a real learning experience. It was an international joint venture, British contractor, Spanish, and the Koreans in Samsung.
Oh wow, yeah.
That was rare, and that's actually big learning curve as well, to see how that process works. And you see it in Australia all the time now and all over the world. But integrating 3 companies coming together on a joint venture is a big feat, and a big cultural. Every company has their own cultural differences, and integrating properly can sometimes be the difference between the project being a success or not. So this project ended up being a success, and it was a really great learning experience.
What made it, like you mentioned there, it was one of the best projects you've worked on.
Yeah.
Why was that? Because I know that JVs or multi sort of franchise projects are traditionally very tricky to come off, successfully, because of all those different systems that people are using and all the different cultural changes. So what made this one so unique?
I mean, for me at that time, it was some of the technologies that they were using that I had never seen before and I'd never experienced. I'm sure they're pretty normal in bridge building and building viaducts and stuff. But we used this movable scaffold system, which was like a slip form horizontal scaffold system where you literally cast the deck like that. That was really good. Dealing with companies from all over the world, again, predominantly the projects that I started working on were really UK based. You were only dealing with UK suppliers. All of a sudden, this whole different supply chain opened up, and they're the type of companies that you were dealing with, and that brings a different level of experience in negotiation tactics and all that type of stuff. And ultimately, seeing how the Spanish work and how their project set up is a lot different to how the British contractors set up. Same with the Koreans. And I mean, even to this day, I've randomly from that project, you meet people. I actually bumped into maybe 6 months ago a Korean guy who worked on that project. Bumped into him in Sydney just in a industry event, which shows you again, construction's such a small world. That's another reason why I do love construction. It is such a small world. Again, a lady I started working in the Middle East, if she worked on the project, bumped into her in the hotel.
Yeah, crazy.
And like, yeah. So that was just again, and it was just a really good atmosphere on the project. Everyone was going in the same direction within our own commercial team. We worked hard, but we also done it with a smile on our face, and that was really key. And that was definitely something of having a good culture on a project doesn't half make a difference. Bad culture and things doesn't help the people be productive as they probably can be. That was definitely something I learned from an early age.
That's something I always mention to people I'm working with, is that you can have a really good company but a really bad culture on a project, and that's what your experience will be of that company will be that one project. You could have 10 of them are all going perfectly well, and one of them is, you got a bad, I don't know, you got bad leadership on the job or something like that, or and the culture stinks, and that is your experience of that business. You mentioned there, Jonathan, about how you always wanted to work overseas. So how did you go from working in this big project in Liverpool to some of this international stuff that you're talking about?
Yeah. So I suppose I'd done 3 years on that project, and then that was the time when I thought, okay, I think I'm ready now to start seeking opportunities abroad. And I probably always had it in my head. It was when it was the lead up to the Qatar World Cup, and I seen all these major projects getting built. So I probably had in my head that was where I was aiming to go. I would say that the motivation was working on the big projects, but it was also probably thinking I'm going to get a tax-free salary here,
money.
And that's what I was probably motivated for at that.
I mean, your quantity surveyor, you're supposed to be motivated by that,
haven't you? Surely, right? And and the exposure to these projects. So anyway, sure enough, I did get offered a role. I had a couple of interviews, but I quickly realised it's not as easy as people make out, and there's definitely Middle East. It's not just not just, I suppose, a risk in the Middle East, but you can go and work for companies where sometimes they may not pay you on time every month. You would never get that in England. And I remember having an interview, and this guy offered me a job. He said, listen, there might be times when you won't get your salary on the 30th of the month.
Right.
And he warned me about it.
Yeah.
He said, you're just going to have to live with that. And I was like, And I thought, I'm skint. I haven't got a pot to piss in. That's a risk to me. And I probably wasn't in a rush at that moment in time, but appreciated that advice. And I never actually took that job. But sure enough, I kept going, and I did get offered a job with a company who were based in Qatar. And again, this was another sort of a risk that I found, is they offered me the job, told me to leave my role. They said, oh, we're getting your visa in place, all that type of stuff. And for whatever reason, the visa never came. I actually believe that he was just waiting for a good time to get me over, and thought I wouldn't be looking for another opportunity. And I left my job at the time that I loved. I had no job. I was sitting there waiting to go to Qatar, twiddling my thumbs for a month or two, actually, thinking, oh, have I just here and made a mistake? But anyway, sure enough, this was through a recruiter, and the recruiter actually was like, I'm so sorry about this. I'm going to sort you something else. Sure enough, within a week, he got me 2 interviews, and I got 2 offers. One was a company on the Doha Metro, and one was for a claims consultancy that was based in Dubai. And I weighed up the option, took the role with the Dubai company. So I say the recruiter at that moment in time, he really did pull out the stops, and I think he felt a little bit guilty that this opportunity hadn't come off, but he rectified it. And I still have chat with him to this day. So yeah, I took this role in Dubai, and that, again, bit of a wild card. Again, opportunities come, and you just got to take what's in front of you at that time. So I started there. This is quite a well-known consultancy, but at the time, their office in Dubai was maybe 3-4 people. We got there at the early stages, and again, I was pretty fresh-faced. He was like, the part of the role is business development. Get out there and start meeting people.
What age are you at this point in time? Are you like?
I was 26 maybe, or 27. I think I got out pretty, in now thinking about it now, I was pretty young to get out there. And as I say, I'll never forget that feeling when you're getting on a plane going somewhere new. I didn't really know anyone. I knew a couple of people, but it was a really good feeling. And still to this day, I miss that feeling of just going somewhere random and thinking.
Guys, I'm interrupting this podcast today to give you some information as to what I actually do every single day. So I own and operate a business called Getting Executive Recruitment. We're a specialist boutique recruitment company, and we specialize purely in the pre-construction and commercial construction markets globally. We're really well known and respected for our work in estimating, cost management, quantity surveying, and contract administration. Because we're hyper niche, we don't have millions of candidates. We don't really even have thousands, but more times than not, we have the right candidate for the right job at the right time. Unlike a lot of recruitment agents out there, we are super experienced in what we do. We understand the market, we understand what makes our clients tick, and our candidates tick too. Each and every single assignment we work on undergoes an extensive executive search process. It's robust and it works 100% of the time. We've also got a team of 5 researchers who map our markets out globally within our niche. They're amazing. They allow us to work fast, which saves our clients time and money too. So if you're interested in our process, drop us a message. Now back to the episode.
I love that too. It's like you're forced out of your comfort zone, you know, because you don't know anyone, you know, like all the administrative stuff like bank accounts and getting paid and like all that stuff takes so much time to get sorted out, you know, and then you've got to really go for it.
Yeah, and so it was a bit like that, and the company were really good. I always had I'm got a bad word to say about them, and they offered me some great opportunities. So anyway, I'm going there to work in Dubai. Spent maybe 2 months there, and then the managing or director calls me up and says, "We've got an opportunities come for a 3-month special mission." And I was like, all right, okay, what's that? And it was to do some delay and disruption claims in Namibia. I said, right. So I mean, I done 2 things. 1 was say yes. 2 was Googled where Namibia was. I didn't have a clue where this place was, right? So I don't know whether you know, but it's just the east South Africa, just above South Africa, on the border of South Africa, Botswana, Mozambique and Angola.
I didn't know where it was, and I love the brass neck of this of your general manager or your director at the time. You know, just a little job here in Namibia. You know, you fell right into it.
Yeah, no, fell right into it, and honestly, to this day, I say that Mersey was the best project I worked on, but that's been the best opportunity I've had personally, professionally. I'll go into that, but it was it was unbelievable experience. So literally from saying yes, it took us about a week to sort out visas and stuff like that. And then there was another guy who came with us who just happened to be British. He was, let's just say, the senior on the project. So we meet in the airport. We hadn't met before. We met in Qatar airport, and we were getting a flight straight to Namibia. And it was quite funny. We were going into land, and the pilot says, "Oh, we're 5 minutes from land," and whatever. And then we were looking outside, and I've nudged him and I was like, "There's no lights. You can't see anything." He didn't see any life. And he was like, "Yeah, I know." And so he was a bit worried. And I was like, "Do you know what we're doing here?" And we didn't have a clue. Honestly, we did not have a clue what we were going to do. And that's what it is like sometimes, especially with the claims consultancy. You sort of get told what you're going to do, but you don't know what type of information, what type of people are going to be there to provide you with the information to ultimately get the job done. And that was this. You go and you've got to work out a way. You got to use your initiative and you've got to problem solve to figure out, well, what is the claim here, X, Y, and Z. And anyway, so we landed in Namibia, pitch black. The car picks us up, takes us to an airport, still cannot see anything. It was really dark. Anyway, wake up in the morning. We were in the capital, which is Windhoek. Unbelievable city. Namibia is, if anyone gets the chance to visit, it really is a lovely place and safe. Obviously, you get all of these pre-misconceptions if you think just because you're going to a country in Africa, it's going to be unsafe and unstable and all these things are just not true. Certainly not for Namibia, and like everywhere, you've got to keep your wits about you. I'm sure Liverpool's the same, Belfast the same. Maybe, you know, that's just how it is, and certainly, definitely part of England as well. You know, get picked up again in the morning and 6-hour journey in the car, and I'm talking, we're not on a motorway here, we're on single lane highway.
Yeah,
it's just desert between where we started in the capital city to where we went to a place. Well, the nearest town was a place called Kettmanswip, which was 6 hours away, probably past 2 small towns. And when I say small towns, there's a petrol station there and maybe a few other things. So I was like, where the hell are we going here? So we got to the guy stopped and went, "This is the closest town, but we're going another hour away from here." And sure enough, we did. An hour away, right into, honestly, it was the only landscape I can describe it as. If you've seen pictures of Mars, that's what it was like. It was amazing. And I mean, at the time, I was a bit skeptical. So we got there, and then we were building a a dam for irrigation purposes, a roller dam, and the 3 months turned into maybe 2.5 years.
That's the way it always goes, isn't it? Nothing ever is 3 months. It always. I used to do contract recruitment, and I remember I used to have a lady who worked for me, and she was a quality manager, and she was supposed to be a month long, and she was there for 5 years. So it's just the way.
And I mean, especially obviously in the claim space, when they say when I suppose the client at the time says 3 months, they think that you're going to draft a claim, send it into the client, and it gets agreed. We all know that doesn't happen. We ended up, the 3 or 4 claims that we were doing, they went through, and we ended up doing a lot more than that. But what we did go through is the full DAB process, or dispute adjudication board process, under the FIDIC contract, and it was amazing learning experience for me. It was FIDIC red book, bill of quantities, virtually unamended, which is unheard of, and they had everything. There was all sorts of stuff going on in terms of I don't know, in terms of the types of claims that we were doing and submitting, and the types of issues the project had.
Were you living on site, or what was the sort of setup like?
Yeah, so we were living on site. So again, I mean, I'll say We Build, that's the company I was working for. They traditionally done, and I'm really good at, by the way, these remote projects, and they are the specialist in hydroelectric projects in the world, and they've got the way they work. They're just really set up, and they've got the knowledge to execute these projects in the middle of nowhere. I've never seen anything like that before, and I didn't actually understand the complexities that go into that. You've got to build camps, all your workers. You've got to make it somewhere that people want to stay and live and work, right? Then the other bit is, obviously, in the middle of Namibia, there isn't much resources in terms of people who are experienced in building a dam. You've got to train these people. So the local town, you're employing all the locals, you're training them up, which really does bring up
the standards,
economic stability of that country, and certainly that area. Like, when you first get there, you sort of see like shanty towns. The living standards are completely different to what we're used to, and it really did make me think about how lucky we are, to be honest, working in the first world and all that type of stuff. And yeah, you just opened up to all these different types of people. And I mean, talking about that project, you've got your own quarry on site. You're taking them. You're taking a chunk out of the landscape to use as all your for your concrete and materials, and quarrying your own material, all that type of stuff. You've got to be resourceful. Like, the contractor is really resourceful. If you want something and you haven't ordered it in time, you're waiting weeks to get it, maybe from somewhere in Europe, or you've got to get it from somewhere else in Africa, or even the main city is 6 hours away. So yeah, that was definitely a different experience. Professionally, just the type of work we involved in was really good exposure for me, and I learned so much, and the experience was really good. But on a personal note, I was just seeing a different world. Like, that experience, you wouldn't get it anywhere else. Meeting people from different types of backgrounds. So working with a lot of Italians, but a lot of local Namibian people, and a lot of people travel from South Africa. A lot of the Afrikaans community, but there you get to understand their culture. Like, and maybe talking about how the construction industry is in the UK and maybe Australia. We moan sometimes if you've got to work Monday to Friday and travel home over weekends and all that. Some of these people, just to feed the families and to keep their house productive, they were only going home once a month. That was it. And they drive in the car 10 hours to get home. Like, that's just the reality, because you need to go where the work is, as we were saying. And that was a big eye opener. And it definitely made me think about, again, how lucky we are, and the opportunities that I've been not given, found, took. It was really, really good.
So what, obviously, from the person, when you arrive on that taxi and you're on that way to that project, the person you are then, the person that you are leaving, did you see like a completely different sort of, I guess, humility, different type of person leaving the project?
Oh yeah, totally. It really did. I grew up a lot, to be honest, and yeah, it just made me first. It just made me not. Again, there's nothing against England, and I love England and I love Liverpool, but I don't know. I just start to realise there's a big world out there, and there's these opportunities that if you want to take them, they're there.
Yeah.
And I did realise that as much as I miss friends and family, I also thought, wow, there's all these different people to meet, and you learn so much from meeting different types of people from different types of backgrounds. It's just a bonus because you sort of get paid to do it whilst you're trying to undertake your job, And I met some really good people, from even professionally, people from the legal background, and people who I'm still working with today. So I mean, going into that, then like I was working for the consultancy at that point, but we were basically seconded to a main contractor, and just again building them connections. That contractor won a project in Australia, so I was like, any opportunities for me? Can I go and work in Australia? And sure enough, I got that option, and that's what led me to ended up coming to Australia. Then
it's so interesting, isn't it? Like, one job can change your life. I always say that one job can change your life in so many beneficial ways, and so sometimes you just gotta say yes to the project. It sounds pretty crazy, it sounds a bit scary, but if you're ever going to take a risk, you're going to take a risk at 26, 27, 28. It's a good time to do it. So you finish this project off. I guess you go through that more of a learning curve on the claims side of things then, Jonathan, because it would have seemed like in the UK you would have been doing a little bit more traditional QSing rather than sort of the disputes and claims. So tell me about how that sort of developed for you.
Yeah, you're right there. So I mean, from when we start, although you've always got that. I mean, I found I did have the grounding and the foundation to start developing claims, but there's definitely an art to producing a claim document and to do it properly. And I was lucky that the guy who I was working with was really experienced in that, and we were doing the claims, but then we took on the contract management role for the whole project. But it was steep learning curve. We were working hard, and what was meant to be a couple of just delay and disruption claims at the start, we ended up doing 20, 30. We going through all of these position papers and all the process that stems from when you have to do a referral under a DAB board process. So it was just an amazing learning experience for me. And then it continued. I mean, I did go back to Dubai for a couple of months, and again, I was thrust into then working for the client, the project, Dubai Expo. It was for a local Arab contractor, where again, this is what we've got to do. We've got to submit a claim. Okay. Yeah, and then you have to go get into the weeds. No one's there to help you. They give you access to one of these softwares with all the correspondence on, and you just got to figure it out. And in that project, we were under a tight time scale. You've got a month to do it, and that was it. So you just got to put the hours in the Middle East especially, and even in Namibia, actually you work 6 days a week. That's just how it was in that type of role, So no, it was a really good learning experience, and really that's my area now. I've got really good experience in commercial management and development and claims and all that type of stuff as well.
You moved to Australia. What year did you end up moving to Australia?
So I moved in 2019.
Oh, okay.
So that was October 2019, and again so it was to work on the Snowy Hydro project. I'm sure you've heard about that one. Again, I was going for the big glitzy infrastructure project that some of the technologies on that have never been done before. There was a particular type, and what really interested me, the sort of contract mechanism that they were using. This hasn't been used anywhere else in the world, which is based on the FIDIC Emerald book. So I was really interested in that, and that's why I put my hand up for that, and sure enough I was able to get an opportunity there. So I spent, I think, 2.5 years on Snowy. So that was, I spent 6 months in Sydney when I first got there, but then I was living regionally out in Cooma, which is, for anyone who doesn't know where Cooma is, like the coldest place in Australia. You're an hour away from the snowy mountains, and you can go skiing there in the winter and all that type of stuff. But again, that was an amazing experience as well, and I met a lot of good people and working with really good people as well.
Australia wasn't on your plan, though. Obviously, you've got that sort of connection to Australia, but it wasn't something that you had sort of sought out.
No, it wasn't. To be honest, I'd visited here, and I love the beaches, and I love the idea of the lifestyle. But I think ideally, I did see myself in the Middle East. But as I say, I just got attracted by this potential opportunity on Snowy project. And I thought, I'll have a bit of that, and that's where they ended up. And sure enough, they ended up in Australia. And again, I do love Australia. I've got a little boy now who's 1. So now, sometimes when I think about, maybe could go to a random place in Africa or the Middle East, I've got to like sit back and take stock of I've got a wife and
you got responsibilities now.
Baby and responsibility. I need to just think about that.
Absolutely. How would you describe, say, some of the differences between what you were doing in, say, the UK to Namibia, or, Middle East to now in Australia? Is there differences between contracts and standards?
I'd say Middle East especially, and Africa, more Namibia, Africa was pretty the same. Everything is a lot more contractual, and I know that sounds a bit fluff. People are willing to go to dispute. They are willing to do it. Sometimes in the UK, they'll really skate around that, and the best thing will be done to try and do a deal, which is obviously best for both parties in some instances. That was the difference. Now you get to Australia, the big eye opener for me is they don't really use standard forms of contract. They don't use your NECs or your FIDICs, even though in some way they may be based on them in some respect, but it's very legal basis. The lawyers are involved from day one, which happens in the UK, but there's a lot more focus on lawyers. Your subcontractors are turning up with legal representatives and legal counsel. You wouldn't really get that in the UK or the Middle East, to be honest.
When I first started recruiting, I would recruit for NEC, JCT, FIDIC contracts. And then when I moved to Australia and I was asking, more about like what type of contract is it? And it would be like, oh, it's a lump sum or it's a D&C, I'm like...
And that was a big thing for me to get my head around at first, because again, sometimes you look through some of these contracts and you're like, some of these, especially if you're maybe dealing with a subcontractor or you're dealing with, a client and you're reviewing terms and conditions, a lot of these things may be solved by using a standard form contract. Okay, they're always completely amended. We get that, but the principles are always there. I mean, I know Sydney Water, so the government agency here in New South Wales, they're using the NEC 4, which is probably not being used anywhere else in Australia, and probably only just being used in the UK now because it's only just come into fruition a couple of years ago. So that's a step in the right direction for collaborative contracting. But whether they'll start using that on other projects, I'm not too sure.
So just obviously, just so I understand more so than anything. So if everyone was working off, a FIDIC contract or NEC4 or whatever it is, what are the benefits of that? As you said, is it makes everyone collaborate, or?
I suppose it depends on the contract, right? NEC is traditionally meant to be a more collaborative form of contract to use, project management tools to make them identifying issues and the two parties working together to mitigate issues if they arise. So I suppose that's one thing. But I think in general, the contracts in Australia put all the risk onto the contractor to the extent that there's no unfair clause in these contracts, but to the extent that when something blows out, eventually you see it on the news all the time that these projects blow out, and ultimately there's normally a deal to be had. That's because probably some of these terms are probably not fair, or there's time hasn't been spent developing the scope or the geotechnical information and all of these things. Whether that changes the fact whether these things wouldn't happen if you're using a FIDIC or NEC, no. It still would happen. But I think the people who are then administering the contracts, you're using a baseline and a foundation that you may have used for the past 10, 20 years. Sometimes these contracts that you're using are completely new. They're very bespoke. They basically the clauses get updated to take into account maybe new case law that it came in within the last few years to try and assist maybe the client to defend against these things in the future. That might be my cynical view, but so yeah.
Did you notice a bit of a change in the perception of what a quantity surveyor does from outside of Australia compared to inside Australia? Because it's something that I've had a lot of issues with, different companies maybe not understanding the variety of what a QS can bring to a project.
Well, I'd say the title in itself. So the QS title in Australia, someone may, and some contractors or some people you may work with think that the QS just does measurement. But if we take the definition of the QS and the role that is maybe, and the responsibility of a QS in, say, the UK or even in the Middle East, it's a lot more wide ranging, which is in Australia, the QS function would also serve as, they call it, the contract administrator here. They're all the type of things that would be under the QS banner and the QS role and responsibilities and projects in the UK. And that was the big difference that I found. You get some contract administrators coming from who are basically accountants or thing. And in some way, I used to get frustrated. I was like, this is undervaluing the profession of the quantity surveyors, because you're getting people who aren't trained in that. Australia, they don't have a QS degree, to my knowledge. Do you know if they
I think there's maybe only a handful of. There's one in Brisbane. Actually, I think that's shutting down. To be honest, there might be one in Perth, maybe, but it's something that certainly isn't in top demand. I think it's quite disheartening, to be honest.
Isn't that strange then? Because all of I'm just saying British, but it's not just British trained and people who come from overseas, they are in demand in Australia because that route, let's just say the sort of training to go, maybe if you go down the RICS route, there's a competencies that you need to demonstrate that you have fulfilled to become part of the RICS membership group or whatever we want to call it. And that's obviously there's a demand for that. So I don't know why the Australian universities don't try and seize that and try and create a course for quantity surveying. But again, every company is different as well. Like I think, again, not having worked with some of the local Australian contractors, I think they follow a sort of similar structure to maybe the UK businesses. But then you've also got all these international contractors who do their own thing and maybe don't value the QS side is maybe strictly to contracts or commercial management, right? And there could be, a different definition for the type of company you're working for.
In summary, what would you say makes a good quantity surveyor, Jonathan? What would you say makes one stand out from the other?
Not to define quantity survey, but I think you got to be inquisitive. You got to be able to problem solve sometimes, depending on what a sort of function your performance. So for example, if you're in claims, you've got to be really willing to get into the detail. There's normally if there's an issue on a project which results in a claim, I used to love this. You go delving back into the detail to an event that may have happened 3-4 years ago. You're looking at records, engineering records, trying to interpret someone's bloody diary, some site manager. I used to love that. You've got to be willing to problem solve, and ultimately, just in general, and it's probably not confined to quantity surveying, but just having the initiative to go out there and try and figure out what needs to be done and when, and having a can-do attitude and all of these things. But that's for jobs in general, and maybe that's something that a lot of maybe younger people don't always have, and they want to be spoon-fed things, and that's probably my comment on that.
Yeah. No, I think 100%. That's 100% true. That sort of inquisitive nature. Ability, a can-do attitude. That's if I was hiring someone for my business, that's what I want. It doesn't necessarily need to be specific to any specific role. That's it's going to make you grow. It's going to make you develop. I guess how has life changed for you then since going from the Middle East to Australia, and how would you describe it for those maybe wanting to do something similar in the future?
Oh, I mean, in terms of Australia, like if people are sitting there listening and I suppose there's two things. One, you could be on your own and thinking about a move to Australia. Yes, definitely do it. Like the opportunities here really are endless if you're interested in construction. The infrastructure budgets in each state are the same as most European countries, probably more. They've got these big flagship projects that will be built over the next 5-10 years. So the opportunities are there. And ultimately, if you're sitting there with a family, I couldn't think of a better place to bring up kids, to be honest. I love the change in the culture and the cultural change in Australia. I never used to get up at 5-6 o'clock in the morning for bloody sunrise. The only people you see at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning in the UK, or at least in Liverpool, maybe Belfast, people on the way home from a night out and a bagel.
Someone dressed like me.
And the coffee shops are full, and that's what I love about here. I'm up out, maybe exercising or taking the baby down to the beach and all that type of stuff. It's just an amazing lifestyle, and as I say, for people, and again, a lot of people who don't come to Australia or want to emigrate, whether anywhere you go in the world, it's normally because you want a better life, right? And basically, you're obviously probably gonna want to work hard for that, and if you work hard here, the opportunities are there.
Yeah, no, it's for sure, and it's something that I didn't realize before I moved to Australia, that you literally wake up at 5 a.m. I don't know why it is 5:30 a.m. It just seems to be natural, but then you're absolutely shattered and sleeping by 9:30. Different lifestyle, but I mean, if you, I guess, for anyone who's maybe sitting out there at the moment, again, maybe say a number of years ago, 26, 27, wants to come to Australia, or maybe wants to reach out to you for any sort of questions or anything like that, what's the best way to get in touch with you, Jonathan?
Yeah. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, and people often message me just for advice, and I love giving a bit of advice of just what's the best route to get here. I mean, what I would always say to people if they wanted to come from the UK or anywhere is, don't pigeonhole yourself by committing to a company straight away. I would say come over here and meet different people, because a company's got to be right for you as well as you right for them. And also just take your time. Like, don't rush into a job, because it happens and you see it all the time. People come here, they maybe don't know where they want to live and all sorts of things, which is I know it sounds basic, but it can have a big influence on how your work and life is, and that's what I would say. If people want to come over, make the decision, get over here and meet as many people as you can before you sort of commit to a job. And once you commit to it, you stay there for a couple of years, work out the industry and see what's different to what it was in the UK,
You got to give things time. And I think the very initial stages of moving to a different country, working in a different country, it's all a bit hectic. You don't know how to go from one suburb to the other suburb. You're finding out road networks and all that sort of stuff. And, there's a whole heap of stuff that you're working through at one time. So take it slowly, but I always recommend getting out, get face to face, meet people. You're going to have more opportunities, or if you do that. And I think that's great advice. But no, thank you so much for being part of the podcast today, Jonathan. Really interesting. I think you're the first person I've had on who's worked in Namibia. Hopefully it's not the last.
There you go, yeah.
Thanks for being part of the show.
No problem, mate. It was good.
Thank you.
Before you go today, guys, I'm just going to ask you to do one thing. Can you please go to Apple right now or Spotify right now and just give us those 5 stars? Hit that 5-star button. It makes such a difference you wouldn't believe. The whole idea of this show is to inspire, educate, and motivate our listeners. And we only do that if we're getting the best guests. The best guests want to see data. They want to see information. They want to see how many listeners that we get. And so all of this stuff is really, really important. So if you can just literally go and do that today, if you enjoy the show, just go and hit that 5-star button. It makes such a difference. I hope you've enjoyed the show. We're going to continue to push this out there every Monday. So if you can, hit that 5-star button. And if you can't, even share it with a friend. Go on to WhatsApp, flick it on to your crew. Guys, thank you so much for listening. On to next week.